Welcome everybody. Lucas Williams here from Gan'na Healing Programs. I'm the founder and director of Gan'na Healing Programs that is now operating across Australia and has been for quite a while now. I just firstly want to thank you very much for coming along here and clicking on this video. Obviously you've reached an area in our webpage where you're starting to look at some programs, and I guess I'm just making this short little film here about some of them programs just briefly to give you a little bit more of an idea on what we do with our programs and across Australia in Indigenous communities and working with service providers. So again, thank you very much for coming and having a look. And look, as I speak, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call or throw us an email to talk a little bit more about making sense of what I talk about or what I might have put on our webpage. So I guess you'll notice that in our webpage you'll see that there is 4 pre-developed programs, workshops, and you'll also see that there is an area where we've added where we can come in and actually develop programs along with service providers and or communities. And so basically I just want to touch briefly about some of the benefits of our programs on our bodies and brains. So if I start with traditional healing and traditional practices, when we implement traditional healing and practices that are from the unique culture that we are working with, so if we're working with, for example, Indigenous people from Australia, and we implement traditional practices from that particular area and that are from Australia, well, we know that the brain neurons fire for 19 days later. Whereas if we were to implement a non-Indigenous practice to an Indigenous community, the neurons actually go to sleep and actually don't fire the way that they would if we would implement traditional practices. So I guess I'll start with that, and I'll go on and talk about how when we implement our programs, and for example, the 4 pre-developed programs that are on Gan'na Healing's webpage, those programs have been developed by some of the best people in Australia and across the world, and we've spent a lot of time in implementing them things and why we implement the things that are inside them workshops. So when so them programs are also developed by traditional elders and nunkeries and also professionals that work within services across Australia and the world. And so we're bringing a two-way learning process to create an Indigenous pedagogy where all people, especially Indigenous people, but we create a safe place where all people can come to a place of meaning within our traditional yarning circles or yarning circles, to be able to draw on each other's experiences of some of the not so good events that has happened in their life, to start to make sense of what has gone wrong in our lives or their lives, and what is it that needs to take place or be put in place for healing to start to take place in my generation. How do I use the tools that I learned from Gan'na Healing, and how do we start to create a community of care in our communities? Or how do we start to then create families of care? Because we can't create a community of care unless we've actually started to care for ourselves and started to care for our families first. So when we implement our healing practices in our workshops, we are using tools that allow our brains to start to experience new things, and meaning old traditional things as well, to start to defrag the not so good experiences that had happened to us, maybe within the last few years, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, but also especially the impacts of colonisation. So we know that the impacts of colonisation has impacted our neurological systems on such a large scale that it's left a widespread destruction through our people and communities. And we want to start to defrag them experiences and start to implement traditional healing practices and Western style best approaches to start to slot in new information into those not so good experiences and pathways within the brain. So we're starting to create I guess, a new neurological pathway system so that the brain and the body can start to create more of a wellness and a wholeness within our bodies and brains, so that we can start to implement this into our families and communities. And we work with the Northern Territory Government and also some largest medical centres in Australia, and we work across a widespread number of remote communities in the Northern Territory, implementing these traditional healing practices through way of traditional healing circle. And so what we're doing is we're bringing the best practice modern approaches, but we're putting it together in a traditional healing pedagogy. And so we want everybody to be able to experience what it is to start to hear, start to listen, start to feel, start to think, and then start to understand what has happened to our life. And so I could talk all day about this stuff. I'm very passionate on it. But look, if you find this interesting and you really want to talk more about these things and what our programs can offer, please get in touch, throw out an email, give us a call. Be happy to talk to any of them out there, any service providers. And Gan'na is something where we train up workers, we train up the service to have best practice response to the impacts of trauma, but not only just a response, best practice approaches in the way, how do we deal with this trauma that we're dealing with in front of us? You know, we might hear it and we might be able to hear people's stories, but what do we do with them stories as professionals or clinicians? And then on the other hand, communities. How do our mob in communities, how do we get trauma informed and start to implement healing into our communities at a level that is quite the same as any service provider that's offering a trauma informed service? Because the idea is bringing service providers, clinicians, and our people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia, up to a point where we're operating with the same knowledge and the same experience, so we're having a more of a holistic approach when we're dealing with trauma in Australia. So look, thank you very much for taking the time to just quickly have a look at this short clip, and I look forward to hearing from you, and you have a great day. See you later.